No sooner have Manchester United recorded their first victory of September, we're facing into a Tuesday night Carabao Cup fixture. We'll be chatting about Saturday's 1-0 victory in Burnley, looking ahead to the visit of Crystal Palace, and answering all your questions on the latest instalment of the Strettycast. Burnley 0, Manchester United 1, and a captain's performance from the enigmatic Bruno Fernandes. I'd like to say I'm surprised, but as we know, water is wet, and Mr. Fernandes is extremely good at football. Now, following successive away defeats in North London, Erik ten Hag has enjoyed a first away victory of the Premier League campaign. More importantly, 3 valuable points following 3 successive defeats in which 10 goals were shipped. Now, in what was anything but a tremendous performance on the day, the goal was 3 points by whatever means possible. Now, considering the magnitude of injuries, the off-the-field situations, was it a job well done, Dale?
Absolutely, Shaun, because I think going into the game after the defeat to Bayern, we didn't really care too much about the overall performance. It was about getting the result. And actually, looking back at the performances, and I watched the game back again, I thought it actually reflects quite well on us. In the second half, we had just total control after we got that goal at the end of halftime. Total control. You looked at Burnley in the last 15 minutes thinking, are they going to throw the kitchen sink at us? And I don't think we gave them the opportunity to do that because we closed out all the danger zones. They weren't able to get in. They weren't able to threaten us. So from that point of view, I thought we did a really good job. And, clean sheet as well. Onana need that for a confidence boost. And we got the 3 points away from home. So I think we can take a lot more positives from the game than negatives. Okay, the performance wasn't, we didn't brush them aside or score 3 or 4 goals. But I think it was a typical away performance and we got the job done.
Brian, you were there. You were amongst the many, many travelling supporters making their voice heard. What was the general consensus in the crowd that day? Was it get the points, get out of there, or was there more to it?
I suppose before the lineup was announced, we were kind of thinking, or most of the lads were hoping we get a good performance, maybe rattle a couple of goals and try to put the team back on better stead again. But coming off those couple of performances we've had since the start of the season, realistically get 3 points and get out of there. It was funny when Johnny Evans was named in the starting lineup. A few eyebrows were raised, but I think he silenced a lot of doubters on the day, myself included. To be fair, I wasn't too sure about it, but Johnny Evans is a red and he hates Scousers. Stuck a Pirlo-esque ball onto Bruno Fernandes' right boot and bang, back at the net. As the game did proceed on, though, when we weren't getting that second goal, it just became a stage where it was a case of get out of there, just get the 3 points by any means necessary, get out.
I want to touch on Bruno and what can only be described as the most unnecessary critique of any key United player that I can personally ever remember. Now, for me, the man is the definition of undroppable. Yet his contributions and his general brilliance, they're continually ignored. Now, he may cut the figure of a petulant player, but in my opinion, it doesn't particularly matter. Does he merit the criticism that he receives on a daily basis, boys?
I think he brings the criticism on himself by the visual of how he behaves in his petulance style. It does rub people up the wrong way, and I won't lie. When he joined us first, he wound me up. You kind of get used to it. You kind of get used to his demeanour and how he behaves on the pitch. Like you said, Shaun, like his stats don't lie, his performances don't lie. It's as simple as that. He's an unbelievable player. I'd imagine, and I know that every single opposition fan absolutely despises him with every ounce of their being, and that's good enough for me to be a United player.
Yeah, I think Bruno is I really like him, right? I think he's one of those players that I like, players that rile others up. If he's not in your team, you fucking hate him. But when he's in yours, it's just about winding up the other. But Shaun, I think what gets me though is that he's actually starting to wind up some of his own fans, United fans, right? That claim that he's not prolific, that he doesn't show up on the big occasions and that. Now, Bruno Fernandes has been maybe 3 or 4 games I can count of where I thought his attitude was appalling, where I thought that his kind of petulance was coming back to bite the team in the arse and not being constructive. That was the game against Liverpool, and there's a few performances there that kind of stand out. But overall, I can see what he brings to the team. There's lots of risk factor, which I don't think a lot of people understand. Like when he gets the ball, he's always looking for that killer pass, right? And that's not always going to come off. But then some people will, throw their eyes up and say, "Oh, he's wasteful. He's wasteful." Well, I rather see players take risks. I've seen too much of Louis van Gaal football where we didn't take any risks whatsoever, and it can be refreshing to see a player like that. Now the thing is, when things don't go the team's way, and you've got one of them, lots of people would point the finger at him. But when things go our way, it's generally coming through him.
One of the only things I would like to talk about, and I did mention it to you, Shaun, recently, as captain of Manchester United, it's one of the only things that I won't say I dislike about his performances, but it's one of the things I question. When we're down, when we're in the trenches and we're up against it, is he the kind of guy as captain who's going to grab someone by the scruff of the neck beside him and drag him on? And like we're used to, historically through the years, we're used to having captains who they'll lead by example, and they'll get that extra 10% out of a player, and they'll drag him kicking and screaming onto the next level of performance, and they'll get you over the line and get you that last bit of a burst to get the win or to see out a game. Do you two boys see him as that kind of a figure, or is he more a captain who performs with his stats and his contribution to the side more so? Like, is his performance superseding his attitude on the pitch, or does he display the attitude of a captain, or what way do you look at it? I just personally, I don't see him ever being a Roy Keane or Brian Robson type player who's going to dig you out of the shit basically when you're in trouble.
I look at it from a sense of, I suppose, what a modern captain looks like in the Premier League. And you look at United, you look at all of our rivals and the sides that are continually pushing for honours every single year. I think the mould of what a captain is now has totally morphed. It's impossible as a United fan not to mention Roy Keane. But we must also remember that Roy Keane was surrounded by the likes of Paul Scholes, David Beckham, Ryan Giggs, these amazing footballers who had the ability to win a game just in a matter of moments, just with a touch of brilliance. And Bruno has been at this club, and he has been the one, in my personal opinion, who has been driving us forward with endless performances. But ultimately, he is the guy who is time after time again, week after week, standing up and creating opportunities for teammates. And I think it's worthwhile pointing out that this year, I think the only one of our forward players who scored in the league is Marcus Rashford. Now, I'm happy to be told I'm wrong with that if that's the case, but Bruno has created so many opportunities in the opening 5-6 games of this season that if our forward players were putting the ball in the back of the net, he would be thereabouts leading the league in terms of assists. I don't think he's a guy that's going to get the best out of his teammates by grabbing him by the scruff of the neck, by pushing him forward and by physically leading that way. I think he's more so a guy who does his talking with his feet, and he's more so a guy who does his talking with his goals, with his assists, and with his overall passion on the field. I know people can point the finger at him, and I know people can say he's petulant. I know he cuts the character and the void of this sort of a petulant character. But when we start looking back through the years, there's been lots of footballers that have done the very, very same thing. And Wayne Rooney was very petulant, was he not? I know Rooney had a different manner in dealing with it, but he was a petulant kind of guy. And just because Rooney would potentially kick the man as well as kick the football, as we saw on many, many occasions, and you have that moment where he's screaming at the referee, he's giving out blue murder, turns around and hits the ball in the volley against Newcastle, breaks the net, and everybody forgets it. He was that petulant type of player. And I don't think Bruno has in any way, shape or form merited the type of criticism that he receives. I can't think of another footballer really and truly who receives the type of critique that he receives as a Manchester United player.
Just on a side note, touching on Rooney, I've always believed angry Wayne Rooney was the best Wayne Rooney we saw. Once he lost that, basically when bald Wayne Rooney went around kicking the living shit out of everyone, that was the Rooney I absolutely buzzed off of. When he started to calm down and potentially grow up later in his career, I just think he lost a bit of his edge. So I don't dislike Bruno's attitude that way. I agree pretty much with everything you've just said about him. But is the team in that case, if Bruno's not a guy who's going to lead by attitude, we'll say, and is going to lead by performance, does the team need someone like that? Does the team need to add someone into the lineup? Not not captain obviously, but someone who will give the boys a bit of an arm around the shoulder and say, listen, 10 minutes left, let's fucking go for this, let's dig in, come on, we can do this. If that's not Bruno's style, that's fair enough, and like you say, modern captains are slightly different to what we're used to, but still think the team could do with a Gary Neville in the background. You're not going to...
Just on that, I think what the team needs now in terms of captaincy, and we haven't had it for a few years, that's why the standing captain last season, availability. And it's the one thing Bruno Fernandes does bring. Is he's there every week, he's fit every week, he's going to be in the team. And the modern captain has changed things around. I don't think you can look at many teams and say their captain is necessarily grabbing teams up by the scruff of the neck. Even at City, who's the City captain?
O'Brien.
Okay, yeah. Well, you see, he's not really a character that's going to be, pulling up fucking people up from the trenches. I don't think. I think he's blessed that he's a very good team around him. I think the modern game has changed, and there's so many egos in the dressing room. I think it's very tough to expect a manager to control a dressing room, never mind a captain, when there's so many people that probably don't like him and so on. But I think availability is the main thing he brings. We know he's going to be in the team every week. And that's crucial. Last season, Harry Maguire was captain. He was hardly ever in the team. And it became a bit of a joke.
This is one thing that I was touching on as well, what I said with the modern captain. When you look at our rivals, and you've just touched on it with Man City with Kevin De Bruyne. Now, I know he's out injured at the moment and he's going to be on the sidelines for quite some time. But when you make your way through the other teams, you're looking at Spurs. Spurs' captain now is Son. Newcastle's captain, Kieran Trippier. Arsenal's captain, Martin Odegaard. These aren't necessarily guys. And actually another one as well as Chelsea is Reece James. I don't think I've ever even heard Reece James speak. And I think the modern captain has just changed so much. Personally, I think another thing that I'd like to add about Bruno very, very quickly, yes, he's petulant, but you can see just how much he cares. Like, he wears his heart on his sleeve. He's not hiding anything in the football field. When he's upset, when he's trying to drive him on. And personally, for me, I feel like if we had more players on the pitch that cared as much as Bruno does, we'd be in a hell of a lot of a better place right now.
I think that's exactly what I'm looking for, Shaun, is someone with him that does care as much, because go back through the performances we've had since the start of the season. That's one of the things I thought we were missing. It's when things weren't going right. I mean, it's easy to compare it to City and Arsenal. City and Arsenal are an established team who are already playing fantastic football, who aren't necessarily in the position that we're in at the moment and have been for a while. When we're down against Brighton 1-0 and the shoulders drop, similar to what happened in Munich, when we drop down 1-0, you look around, you can visibly see the team. It just gets so disheartened instantly. And they're just, I don't know. We said it on the last podcast. Sorry, they just don't look like they've got the bollocks for it. They just don't like that. They've got the heart to come back against adversity, and it's something I think that the team is lacking. Is someone, and if Bruno isn't the man to do that, fair enough. Even though I begrudgingly accept the modern football captain ideal, I still don't particularly want to give in to the modern football setup, and I'd still like to see somebody more old style captaincy performances. But if we drop down 1-0 to Brighton and Bruno's not going to be G'ing the team up and driving them on, who is? I mean, you can't. John, getting that right. Who's the one literally going around to Marcus Rashford saying, Marcus, you haven't tracked back, you've done nothing, pull your finger out of your hole and get into the game, or walk over to the right hand side to the young Pelistri and say, look, I know you're only a young lad, I know you're getting into the side, but look, put an arm around his shoulder. I think any football team, if they're going to be successful, unless you have a completely set up side, like Pep has had time to build, like Klopp has had time to build, like Arteta has been given time to build, Ten Hag hasn't had that time. And he's in a situation where things are dicey at the moment. I think he would be sleeping a hell of a lot easier at night if he knew he had player X, who, when we go 1-0 down tomorrow night against Palace, is going to give a little quick jog around to the boys and say, look, lads, don't drop the fucking head. Come on, keep going. Get up, let's go. Come on. We're Man United. This is what we do. It's all well and good, Bruno, going out and pinging balls around and creating chances, but attitude is massively important, like especially when you're dealing with so many different types of players. Again, I mentioned Pelistri. He's a kid. He hasn't got the experience that other players have. Garnacho, a different type of kid, different type of attitude, far more cocky and arrogant. So you have to deal with him completely differently. Rasmus Højlund, again, young lad come into the side. Not quite sure what his personality is like just yet, but I'm assuming needs to be dealt with a little bit differently again. That to me is where a captain or vice captain strongly come into the equation and will be the difference between turning them defeats into draws or wins, or turning around a deficit of 1-0 and going back chasing it again.
Brian, spot on, because that is an ingredient that we've been missing since the start of the season. is a few personalities that I think, if you go back to last season, haven't been showing up. One of them last year was probably one of my favourite players, was Andrew Martinez. But in terms of what he brought to the table and the opening few games of the season, it wasn't there. You cast your mind back to when he first came in, he's making tackles. Dallo was making tackles and he was slapping him on the back, and there was a real sense of togetherness in the whole team. We were all commenting on it, and it was something that we liked to see. Since the start of this season, that hasn't been there. And you can say, look at Bruno Fernandes, although he is probably one of the players that has carried his attitude the way we liked him from last season into this campaign. But the question is, why aren't the rest? Why isn't Martinez standing up? I mentioned that in the podcast in Munich about McTominay. His attitude, you see by his body language, it's not the same as it was 12 months ago. That's just a squad player. There is problems. I think you're touching on something that definitely does exist, but I wouldn't be pointing the finger at Bruno solely, because if he starts throwing in the towel, that's when I would be worrying.
Just in case you're picking me up wrong, I'm definitely not fingering Bruno solely for this. I'm just saying that it's
Bruno.
It's something I don't see from him, but I'm not just solely saying it's Bruno. Like, literally what I said was, where are the other players that are stepping up to do this, or where's the other player in the side that's going to take up that mantle and get involved? I mean, like you said, Martinez last season, yes, Martinez used to lead by performance. He used to kick the living shit out of someone and it G'd everyone up and got him going. Martinez has been a shadow of himself this season so far. Casemiro likewise. Casemiro went around booting lads, although it got him 2 red cards in a week or two. But again, leading by example. That's kind of what I'm getting at. It's not so much me picking on Bruno. It's more saying, why are the rest of the team not arsed, basically?
This has to all stem back to the fundamental issues that are happening in the dressing room. Because you mentioned Casemiro. Correct me if I'm wrong. He's the captain of Brazil right now. You've got Christian Eriksen, has previously captained Denmark. You've got Raphael Varane, has definitely had a couple of stints as captain for France, be it deputy or whatnot. You have these veteran players within the squad like Marcus Rashford, Luke Shaw. I will say one thing as well, though, when we're speaking about somebody being vocal, Andre Onana comes out as a guy who does cut the figure of a guy who's going to be very, very vocal and will be happy to orchestrate his defence vocally, a la Peter Schmeichel. It's just evidently he has to be very careful about what he says and who he says it to, or Jamie Carragher mightn't be too keen on it.
Yeah, and there is a few people out to get Onana already, but look, all he can do is just the weekend kept his clean sheet. He needed that because the howler in Bayern or Munich was one that, at the start of your United career, you don't want to be committing, but I go back to Peter Schmeichel, David De Gea, both struggled when they first came to the club. The responsibility of being Manchester United first choice goalkeeper is absolutely massive. We can see it alone with outfield players when they sign for the club, and the scrutiny they get so quick early on. It's not the same in other clubs. When you're a goalkeeper, the second you make a mistake and it contributes to a goal, everyone's out to get you. So I think Onana coming out after the Bayern game and speaking, showing how brave he is. He's definitely brave enough to be the United goalkeeper. But a few more clean sheets needed and people start getting off his back, I hope.
We have a number of people who are capable of cultivating a proper ethos, an ego, experience, and a cultivation across every single line on the field, from goalkeeper to defence, midfield to attack. I think it all, as I said, stems back to the issues that are occurring off the field, coupled with the fact that half of the squad is injured. I would hope that as these players start coming back in and you start welcoming someone like Sofian Amrabat, who's also a very, very experienced international footballer, that this range and this group of players can mingle together and can ultimately aid Bruno Fernandes in being able to lead in the field. Let's switch focus ever so slightly and we'll look at Crystal Palace and the beginning in the defence of the Carabao Cup. Now, it's a competition that we all grew up looking down our noses at, but in recent years, its importance has very much been emphasised. Now, in truth, it is the full stop, I think, behind Erik ten Hag's opening season and the silverware that Solskjaer missed out on. So given what we know about the manager's tendency to select his strongest side at all times, are we anticipating wholesale changes?
I'd be absolutely shell-shocked if he did ring in the changes. He's proven time and again, not his style. I go full balls or no balls at all. On the flip side, I'd probably prefer to see changes. Although the fact that we've got, let's call it an injury crisis going on, I'd be saving those players for the league, which I think is at the moment is far more important. And I think there's plenty of young lads who are on the fringe who could easily come in tomorrow night and do a job. I mean, Garnacho hasn't got a hell of a lot of minutes this season so far. I'd start him 100%. Hannibal Mesbury would be starting for me. Hoyland again is a dodgy one because Hoyland, you're still kind of debating, is he fully fit? I mean, we've seen pictures of his back with all the cupping and the strapping and stuff. It's like he might be bandaged up to try get through it and get him back fit while still playing football. I wouldn't be too inclined to maybe
needs the minute, surely.
I needs the minutes, Dale, but like you don't want him breaking down again in the next 2 or 3 games, and we're stuck with Martial up front going around like I won't continue, but I'd be starting Martial tomorrow night, to be honest with you. I'd be starting Garnacho, I'd be starting Mesbury. I'd probably give Pellistri the start again. Can't see any reason not to use Johnny Evans. I'd definitely ring a few changes. I really would. But I'm not expecting it, but I'm hopeful.
And given what we now know that in January it looks like our goalkeeper, who we were just speaking about, may be unavailable, I wonder what the likelihood of Bayindir getting a game is. You think he might come off the bench?
No, I think we've just spoken about the start Onana's had at United, and I think he needs games. And there's no harm in him playing every game at the moment. I think later stages of the Carabao Cup, or if we manage to surprise a few and qualify early for the Champions League, maybe give Benham there his debut then. But the priority for me would be definitely getting Onana's confidence back up, so he has to start for me.
No, I'm getting the beanpole Turk. Get him between the sticks and let's see what he's made of. Give Onana a break. Get him off the pitch. Get the big skinny lad in goals and see what happens. Come on, what happens? He comes out tomorrow night, pulls off 6 worldies, doesn't concede one under his belly, and he can ping a pass like Pirlo. Oh, Nana, where have you gone?
We saw Sofian Amrabat come off the bench for his highly anticipated debut. Do we reckon he's in contention to start, or do we think he is another couple of games, another couple of training sessions away from being fully fit?
45 minutes from me tomorrow night. Don't rush him. He's just coming back from 0 pre-season, an injury. Got to see him just run up and down the line on Saturday night before he came on for a little bit of a cameo. But I think it's probably still a bit too soon. Let's get him back in nice and easy. Give him 45 minutes, pending how the game is going. Like, I mean, look, I probably wouldn't start him. I'd bring him on for the second 40. No, actually, sorry, I'm completely wrong. I would start him. I'd start him, see how he does for the first 45 and get him off. If he needs to come off after half an hour, fair enough. Probably more wise to start him and pull him rather than bring him on after half time. So I'd give him 45 minutes.
I'd start him ahead of Casemiro. I think Casemiro and Varane are 2 players that I'd be definitely keeping away from this fixture. And interestingly, Amrabat became the 49th different nationality to represent United as a Moroccan. So he was the first Moroccan to represent United making his debut, but that's 49 nationalities. Pretty impressive.
It's usually me who pulls something like that out of the bag, so fair play to you. Now, I want to look at something here, okay, because there's something we've spoken about several times, and it's about this erd of Erik ten Hag overachieving last season. So we had the 3rd place finish, the FA Cup final, and we won the League Cup. Now, we've all sort of largely agreed that he overachieved, and when we look toward this season, it was more so maintaining what we did last year and maybe getting a little bit closer in the context of the league. Keeping that in mind, would you still be looking at this competition tomorrow night as something that we should be going out trying to take by the throat and absolutely progress on to the next, and that we can look towards the final and the potential of gathering more silverware?
I think realistically speaking, Shaun, I mean, Palace have to be looking at their own league performances and position. So I can't see Palace not resting quite a few, considering they've got us again, especially for them away at Old Trafford on the weekend. I don't think it's too damaging to take a certain number of players out of the team to be replaced with players perfectly capable of beating what I'd expect to be a Palace B side or at least a Palace 8.5 or something. But I don't think it's one he has to be overly worried about. I think he can manage the game during the game, if that makes sense. See how the first 45 go. If he needs to bring on a couple of the bigger guns, go for it just to get through. It's definitely a competition we need to keep in check and keep going in. But given the start of the season we've had, which has been an absolute shit show, I think the focus has to be at the moment, maybe to the detriment of the Carabao Cup, it has to be on the league. But I'd still be confident enough that even with rotating a few, we should have absolutely plenty in the tank to do these tomorrow night.
Regardless of whether it's in the League Cup, Europe, I just think it's imperative at this moment in time that we can put some bit of a run together. Winning breeds this positive mentality, and the positive mentality can breed momentum. And as we enter into what is a 5-6 game period before we meet Man City, we really, really have an opportunity with the likes of Galatasaray, Copenhagen, a double header against Crystal Palace, Brentford, of actually putting something together with no disrespect to any of those teams. We should be beating them, shouldn't we?
4 games starting with Burnley were 4 games you should not be losing. I mean, regardless of how things are, we're still Man United. You can't be looking at them fixtures and thinking we're going to get beaten these. We should be getting 4 victories. And if you come off the back of 4 wins on the bounce, things have to improve. My only fear, or my biggest fear for this season, is that things have become so toxic behind the scenes that we're fighting a losing battle as it is. That's a massive concern of mine. I hope not. I hope I'm completely and utterly wrong. But I've got an awful gut feeling that Ten Hag is dealing with an awful lot of stuff behind the scenes we're not seeing. And some of it maybe we are seeing is filtering through in the media and reports and that. But it's something that might be his biggest task this season, even bigger than on-pitch performances, is trying to bring some unity back into that squad and trying to bring some morale improvements. Because if we're to believe the story with like the likes of Jadon Sancho is causing ripples throughout the squad, some players are backing him, some players aren't. That's not good. It's not good, and it reflects on the pitch every game. So I think Ten Hag needs to get the house in order first, if it's doable, because we've seen plenty of United teams over the last number of years throw a manager under the bus and get the arse with his decisions, and it's only went one way. So I would hope that the fans and the club itself, for a change, back to Gaffer.
Now, I want to move along very swiftly to the listeners' questions, because we have got a heap of them to get through this week. And we're going to kick off with a man who I think we can all agree has solidified himself as the regular contributor, and that is Mr. Dave Cleaver. Now, Dave is asking if there are any thoughts on the alleged unrest in the dressing room, as we just spoke about, and who might be behind it. And additionally, what does the boss do about it?
Well, Ten Hag has a big job in his hands, as Brian alluded to, and I think he needs to stamp out whoever the moles are. The root of the problem right now, I think a lot of people will point to Jadon Sancho, whether it's him or not that's briefing. The feud that exists there is certainly causing ripples, and it's a distraction, because right now results should be taking priority. That's the manager's. Ultimately, it's his job is to improve them, and he's having to deal with a brat, someone who is still arriving late to Carrington, is still not cooperating with staff, is still refusing to apologise, is still one of the highest earners at the club. I think his behaviour is appalling, Shaun. Sancho, I think he should be looking at this as well at his future club, and clubs will be looking at this thinking, has this kid got behaviour issues? Well, he had discipline issues at Dortmund, arriving late at training, and he was fined a week's wages, I believe, and left out of the team. He never really got a proper run in the England team. It's no wonder why. And now Manchester United have this baggage, which they've spent a lot of money on, and sadly Ten Hag has to deal with it. So to answer your question, what can he do about it? Sancho can never be let back into the first team again.
And we're going to stay on that now, because there was another question came through, and it was for all three of us, from Larry, aka Cantona's Collar, on Twitter. And he says, can you come up with a single positive for a professional footballer with a reputation of tardiness playing FIFA until 3 o'clock in the morning? Brian, I don't think Keano would have tolerated this, would he?
He certainly wouldn't. I don't, and I hope to God Eric Ten Hag doesn't. As Dale just said, to answer Larry's question, is there a positive? Yes. He's just highlighted himself as an arsehole. That's what he's done. He's shown us. He's shown his true colours, what kind of stomach he has for fighting for his place. I could be wrong. I think he was quoted as saying when he came back from his hiatus that he was willing to fight for the badge. And if this is what fighting for the badge looks like, we're in serious trouble. It's a trend. Romelu Lukaku, dickhead. Paul Pogba, dickhead. Jesse Lingard, dickhead. Dean Henderson, dickhead. All gone. Jadon Sancho, next one out the door for me if he keeps going the way he's going, because it's looking like he's a dickhead, and I hope he isn't. But is it ever going to stop that we're going to keep turning over or signing or bringing through players that have the attitude of a dog's arse constantly? Because it's shocking to watch. It's shocking for our team to be putting up with. It's shocking for the fans to be watching. I mean, imagine how many fans are paying every week to go through those gates to watch their team, a team that they've loved all their lives and are meant to be proud of. And there's a lad playing FIFA online against spotty kids from some other part of the world who are probably calling him names and making him cry. And he's doing this till 3 o'clock in the morning. And he's on, what, 300,000 a week? Sancho, grow up a small bit, will you?
And something we've spoken about previously, that it is perfectly fine for the three of us and for anybody else to criticise a player, to logically criticise a player without actually getting nasty on it. Now, that's not what we're doing here. We're not getting nasty. We're looking at a guy who's got responsibilities, you know, and something that's forgotten quite a lot here, and it's something that really, really comes deep with me because of my son. You know, I got a son who's a teenager, and these guys look at these footballers, they idolise them. You know, these guys, they look up to them and they look to set a positive example. And we've got a guy who, as you said, he said he wanted to play for the badge. Another thing he also said was that all he wants to do is play football with a smile on his face. Now, for me, unless something has been massively lost in translation, this is a fella who was taken under the wing of the manager, given preferential treatment as we said previously, like a father would to a son, given time away from the first team squad, given a tailored platform to help him to grow and to help him to recover from whatever difficulties he was suffering off the field. Surely at this stage, with everything that we have read, everything that we've seen, the gestures such as instead of going out and watching your first team colleagues play a game of football, you're going to sit and you're going to watch an under 18s game of football rather than the senior team, to make a point and further emphasize that by going on playing a video game, which he's perfectly entitled to do, but making it known that he's playing this game until 3 o'clock in the morning instead of actually applying himself. It's beyond forgivable at this stage, and it cuts the cloth of a guy who is looking for the earliest exit, and I can't see beyond January.
You nailed something there, Shaun. Like, as a kid, when I first started watching United and when I fell in love with them first, you do idolise these players and you do put them on a pedestal. Obviously, as we get older, and I'm probably starting to show my age a bit now, you kind of lose that godlike adulation for players. But as a kid, you're dead right. And like, as a kid, it was Steve Bruce, Gary Pallister, Mark Hughes. Tough as nails, kick the living shit out of everyone, get the shit kicked out of them, and still give everything they possibly had. Go through the years, go on to Cantona, even Patrice Evra. I mean, I know he's a bit of a clown off the field now after he's retired, but when he was playing football for United, there was nothing he wouldn't do and nowhere he wouldn't put his head for that badge. That's the kind of players that we have always given the most respect for. That's the kind of player we'll sing from the sideline for. It's people who show us that they give a shit that we're singing from. The likes of Jadon Sancho and so many more modern footballers don't. And it's probably one of the reasons people might be losing a bit of love for football as time progresses, because I can't, like, when my kids are a little bit older, they're only 2 and 1 now at the moment, but not even 1. When they're a little bit older and they're watching this, I can't see a young lad of mine asking for a Jadon Sancho shirt. I mean, it'd make me sick. You know, it's not good enough. Like, this kind of behaviour is not good enough. You're at the biggest club in the world. You're getting paid the biggest money you're ever going to make in your career. I know you've made it to the top. Don't rest on your laurels, collect your few quid, let your career go to shit and leave. Go on and prove why you were bought, and go on and prove why we signed you, and prove why people put the time and effort and money into making you a United player and giving you the privilege. And this is the key thing that players seem to forget. It's a privilege to play for Manchester United. If it ever becomes not a privilege, leave. Simple as that. It is a privilege that many players will have dreamt of their entire career as professional footballers that will never get a chance to do. They will never get a chance to run out in front of the Stretford End or Old Trafford on a Wednesday or Tuesday night in the Champions League with that music blaring. It gives me shivers to even think about what it must feel like. Players around the world would give their left arm for it. You have it. Don't throw it away.
Brian, that was electric. That was absolutely electric. And it brings me on to our next question, because it's finally poised and all these are coming together nicely. James Gorse asked a very simple question, Dale. He said, do you think Hannibal has done enough to keep his place for the next league game? And when we consider Jadon Sancho and everything that Brian has just said and everything that I said, and then you look at Hannibal, a guy that has broke his arse to get through into the first team And as we spoke about last week, scored that goal. And I know it only turned out to be a consolation goal, but what it meant to him.
Definitely for the cup game. I'm not sure about the league game because it depends on who's available. Because I also need to remember he's 20 years old. He's only coming into the team. I think people are very quick to say that these players deserve a place in the team. He's only really been in the team now for maybe two games or so. So it's very early. I've liked what I've seen. His intensity off the ball is much needed. I think he's an improvement on McTominay. He's a better option than McTominay. So I think I'd have him ahead of him in the pecking order. But whether or not he should start, I think, look, we could be at home to Palace the weekend talking about Mason Mount starting or Amrabat starting, and these players, new signings, are obviously ahead of him.
Definitely put himself in the conversation, though. His performances, his aptitude, and I suppose something that we spoke about with Brian there a minute ago, his desire and his want and will and passion to fight for the badge and to wear that shirt and to go out acknowledging the privilege that he has to wear the shirt and to play in front of all of those fans. And he understands it. You can see in the celebration for the goal, it wasn't just because he scored a goal. He understands what it means to score a goal for Manchester United. And this is the type of attitude. It breeds back into what we were saying about Bruno Fernandes at the start of the podcast. It's players wanting to wear the shirt.
The moment that Hannibal Mejbri scored that goal, and some people laughably slated him for that celebration, that moment he scored that goal showed me everything about him as a person. It just showed me exactly what the passion and the excitement, the childish adoration for the fact that he's just got onto the pitch for United and scored a banger in front of thousands of fans that he's wanted to play for so long. If anyone can show me that Hannibal Mejbri is staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning playing FIFA, I give up, because that's not a kid who's doing that. That's a kid who's working his arse off to get that spot. And he deserves every single bit of plaudits he gets for his performances lately. I think he's been absolutely fantastic. I think his attitude has been exemplary as a kid coming into the side. I also think he's a nasty little fucker, which I love. He's plenty about him. He's no problem going around and putting it about lads, which is something our team has lacked a small bit of. So I'm not going to do an Adnan Januzaj and spend the next 6 months singing his name and getting overly excited about it, because them wounds will never heal. But I'm quietly expectant of Hannibal Mejbri making it to the first team in a more regular fashion.
Stay where you are, Brian, because a buddy of yours, Oystein, on Twitter asked a very, very good question. It's very relevant. Who should our emergency fullbacks be when we run out of actual fullbacks?
Like you can shove Victor Lindelof right back if you're stuck. But then again, the way we're going at the moment, we're lacking centre-backs as much as we're lacking fullbacks. It's a good one, because I kind of think that Ten Hag, if we do get into that situation, I think he could potentially move to more of a wing-back situation with three in the centre and start playing some wing-backs. Now, again, our most talented left winger, Marcus Rashford, doesn't bother his arse working, so you can't stick him out there. He's not going to give you any defensive qualities. On the right-hand side, we lose right wingers by the week, so I'm only waiting for the day that Pellistri's after knocking someone's dog down or something, and he's gone for a while, because Jesus Christ, if there's anything any right winger hasn't done yet, I don't know, but probably backed over the dog as well to finish him off. Jesus, Facundo, relax. We're probably in trouble. I hope maybe this India lad that came in from Turkey, maybe he can stick it right back, because the way things are going, Oystein, if we lose many more, we're going to have to start looking to the academy or sticking to the likes of Mason Mount, right wing back or something, because we're running out of options.
Yeah, when I read that, and even when I was reading it out to you, I said, like, when you consider the players that are available, a 3 centre back with 2 wingers filling in at left and right wing back is about the only way we can go in it, isn't it?
But who goes left? Because I can see Mount doing that job. Mount's the kind of guy who'll give you work rate, and he'll get stuck in, and he's capable of playing out wide right as well. But look out wide left. I mean, your options are seriously limited. Like at the moment, without Luke Shaun aside, I could see it. Jesus, no. An inverted left wing back, centre midfield. I'm getting confused. Even this modern football is getting way
tripping over words now.
Yeah, it's getting way too much for me. It's getting way too much now.
I seen a new stat about the percentage of the tilt of the pitch.
No, this is as bad as XG. If anybody ever mentions XG on this podcast, I'm done. If anybody brings up
I love it.
If anybody
apparently Mikel Arteta has great tilt.
Mikel Arteta I was about to say Mikel Arteta. Mikel Arteta's a twat. Anthony has to say is not null and void. Do you see him actually on a complete tangent? Did you see him the weekend having it out with your man from Spurs? Was it Højbjerg? Where he was outside his box and he's getting out so close to the line, his lads run down the line, jumping around the place. He's an absolute idiot. Jesus Christ.
Some people just crave the attention, and I think with Arteta, he's fully aware of the persona that the English media have. He knows that he can do no wrong in their eyes now, because he's the heir to Pep Guardiola, and he knows that they have a love affair for him and the brilliant brand of football that he's orchestrated in North London. He plays up to it.
It's almost like he's similar to Klopp in the sense that Klopp's become a bitchy, moaning dickhead. But Arteta... become more of... Whereas Arteta is at the stage where he's doing the same thing, being a complete idiot, but they haven't got to the stage where the media have turned on him and don't like him and will actually highlight it. Obviously, also the fact he's got nothing to do with Manchester United. They won't discuss it at all on any format or platform or any social media because it doesn't sell and it doesn't get clicks. But yeah, he's an absolute clown.
Dale, I've got a good question here from Paul Thames, and he was asking for you. It was a very simple one. He says, are we neglecting the talents of Alejandro Garnacho, or is Ten Hag correct to introduce him with care?
Ten Hag is correct to introduce him with care. I thought actually texted you the weekend about 10, 15 minutes into the second half, and I said, this is a game for Garnacho, but just not yet. Don't bring him on just yet, maybe in a while. And I know he didn't bring him on, but there was lots of people on social media kind of jumping on this, and I'm sure Garnacho's brother, Roberto, who was always on Twitter running his mouth, was amongst them. But when Garnacho has started games this season, he hasn't played well at all. He's offered next to nothing when he started games. When he's come on off the bench, he's made a bit of an impact. And I think right now, that's how Ten Hag is going to use him in games. And that doesn't mean he comes on in every game. He's still a young player, still working his way into the team. But I think Ten Hag is right. I think the game against Palace on Tuesday night in the Carabao Cup, there's a game I give him a start to go and see if he can do better and give Rashford a rest. But I think Ten Hag is on top of this one big time.
Can you imagine if they had followed through and given him the number 7 shirt and he performed in the opening couple of games as he did? Can you imagine what they would have done to him, how they would have ridiculed him and what it would have done to his confidence?
He'd have been absolutely destroyed for it. So I think Ten Hag is dealing with him perfectly. But the only thing I'll ask you about, boys, is I actually haven't seen the clip of it. I've only heard and read about it. Garnacho's antics behind Ten Hag recently on the sideline. What did you make of that? Did you see it?
No, I didn't see anything.
Again, as I say, I haven't seen it back, but he was on the sideline. The crowd were cheering his name. He was standing behind Ten Hag, and seemingly he was kind of geeing up the crowd and
ripped off the shirt.
Yeah, he was giving it loads. Yeah, he was giving it loads. Is that a bit much for a kid who's trying to make his way into the side, who hasn't earned the right to be a dick yet?
Just what you said earlier on about certain players, that's being a dickhead, if you ask me.
It's a bit much, isn't it? I mean, don't get me wrong. I have more than once tweeted, I'll call my next son Alejandro, because I absolutely love the lad. He's given me some great moments in football, and he's an unbelievable talent.
Yeah, but sorry now, Brian. I was one of the people that told you don't get too in love with Garnacho, because it's inevitable.
Oh, you know he's going to leave.
He's off to Real Madrid. Yeah. You can see that, and I wouldn't be getting too attached to him for that reason. But I just hope that he can somewhat blossom at Manchester United, and we can get a big fee for him.
I know he's Bernabeu bound for sure. I think we all know it, even though I'm in complete denial about it. It was just the first thing I've seen from him that I didn't like, and I just think he needs to cut that out until he gets into the side. And even at that stage, you don't do that behind your manager. For the love of Jesus Christ, behave a small bit.
I think it really buys into the whole thing about social media and how we say time and time again that you have to be so careful about how you act on social media, because regardless of the PR teams and the people that are looking after these players, they certainly look at what's being read. And Garnacho would have fed off of this narrative that built up when Mount was given a number 7 shirt, for example, about how he should have got it and he should be doing this. And then he hears his name in the crowd. Like, I'm not in any way, shape, or form downing the player. I think he's a brilliant talent, wonderful player, absolutely blossomed through the youth academy. I'd be dumbfounded if he doesn't reach that level at Manchester United where he starts having the boys in Madrid knocking on his door. It's almost like it's already been written. But I agree with you, Brian. There's a certain way that you need to handle yourself, and you're only knocking on the door. You're taking baby steps. You have all of the talent, all of the potential, and you have all of the support of the Manchester United faithful. There's ways and means to go around it, and it's buying in with this sense of toxicity that's going towards the manager at the moment. And I don't buy it. I don't like it in any way, shape, or form.
Just quickly on that as well, if memory serves me correct, it started last season. Garnacho got a slap on the wrist by Ten Hag and Bruno Fernandes for the way he behaved in pre-season. We have to remember this is a young player. We talked about Bruno being a bit petulant, but this is genuinely a kid we're talking about, and there'll go probably hurdles with every young player at times with behavioural issues, and they need to be kind of put back into line every now and again. But if that is true, that Garnacho was making gestures behind the manager, might explain why he did come off the bench the other day. And if it is true, totally stand by the manager on that, because you just can't tolerate that kind of crap.
One thing I will say, Dale, youth is no excuse for it. I mean, you can look at it in one way. Bruno has earned the right through his performances to be a little bit of a petulant fucker at times if he wants to be.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
But when you're at the stage that Garnacho's at and Hannibal and them are at, you're knocking the door and you're trying to get into the side and you're trying to earn the respect of your manager and your teammates and the fans. Keep the head down, let the football do the talking, and the rest is just noise.
We're speaking about the football doing the talking. And to the next question from Ryan Malava. And it's very, very simply put, 2 words. He wants us to talk about Rashford's form. Are we looking at a guy that is trying too hard? We know the talent is there. We know that he's got limitations in certain aspects, but we know he's an uberly talented footballer who broke all sorts of personal metrics last season. Are we looking at a guy that's trying to build on last season and really, really take it to the next level and ultimately taking one and too many touches?
Bit of a mixed bag, because one game you look at him, he's trying too hard going forward and he gets absolutely torn apart for it. Then 10 minutes later, he's not bothering his whole tracking back. So, like, I don't know what's going on with Rashford at the moment. He's not reaching the heights he did. And I know the rest of the team aren't playing very well either, but, like, you still need to depend on your star guys to get you out of trouble. And these moments of brilliance, as people keep using that term, individual brilliance, whatever way it's put. Like, I don't know, Brighton, I thought going forward he was really good. He got unlucky. But, like, he needs to realise we've been in this shit defensively all season. We've been struggling all season. The back line has been in trouble all season with constant personnel changes and injuries coming in and out of the side. The least you can expect from your left winger is to track back and work hard. So it's a strange one. His form has been nowhere near what it was last season, for sure. I mean, it's been proven in the stats. But I think, I don't know. Maybe, do you know what, Shaun? Maybe it is something to do with what's going on in the dressing room at the background. Maybe his head isn't quite there. I mean, we've seen through the years, he may not be the strongest player mentally. Like, his back was slightly injured for a while. Yeah, do you know, time of his back injury looked like he minded himself and he wasn't confident enough to go and get stuck into it. I don't think he's ever too far away from having the shoulders down a little bit, which is one of his negatives. But he's, like, don't get me wrong, phenomenal footballer in his day. I absolutely love to watch Marcus Rashford on song. When he's firing, is absolutely lethal. There's not many players in the world as devastating as he can be when he's up to it.
And one word that we're using, stay where you are, Brian, because one word we've been using is petulance. We used it with Bruno, we used it with Garnacho. Do we see a little bit too much petulance out of Rashford this season? It's something that he's always had. He's always had this thing where he drops the shoulders, as you said, but he's very, very quick to start moaning and complaining when maybe something isn't going right for him. And then he'll use any sort of a misplaced pass on the other side of the field and start swinging his hands around the place. I feel we're seeing more petulance out of him this year than we have in previous years. Am I imagining that?
No, it's attitude, Shaun. That's what it is. It's probably a lack of desire, because Marcus Rashford at his best, his petulance comes in the form of giving right backs a boot up the hole. Plenty of times he's kicked the lad and lashed out and squared up to have a lad face to face. No problem with that. If you're playing good football and you want to take on your right back and you want to go head to head with him, go for it. But Marcus Rashford is starting to cause an awful lot of conversation on a bad note about his attitude. I mean, we're not talking about him scoring pingers. We're not talking about him setting up loads of goals and ripping defences apart. We're talking about his lack of desire, and that's a very worrying thing to be discussing for one of your star players on the side.
I'm not all that worried because I look at his performances this season. I know the numbers aren't fantastic. They aren't what they were last season when he scored 30 goals, but it's not for a lack of trying. I see him creating chances in every game. He's not putting them in the back of the net, but he's creating chances. And since we're talking about a player that scored 30 goals last season, I think it's too soon to be worried. What I look at as well, maybe one thing that I would criticize Rashford on is that you would like to think that he would start coming of age. You know, he's not the young player from the academy anymore, the one that the experienced players should be putting their arm around. I look at Rashford after last season scoring 30 goals in which we could rely on him. I now kind of want to start seeing someone that the academy boys can now look up to and say, right, he's one of the senior pros. He's one of the ones that pulled us out of the shit when we need it. A bit like the way we spoke about Bruno Fernandes. I think if Rashford wants to become a top player and reach that next level, that's maybe where the frustration is coming from, because I don't think he's at the top of his game right now, or has been. I think he can still develop into a better player. But to make that jump, we need to see more consistency. We need to see him standing up maybe when the team needs it most, when no one else is performing. Because Rashford, like I said, he's not a baby anymore.
I agree and I disagree with you. We're only we're 6-7 games into the season. A player that's off form in the shape of Marcus Rashford is off form in front of goal, or off form in beating players and creating stuff. If you're talking about lads from the academy looking up to players, the academy player looks at Marcus Rashford's performance this season and he sees a fellow who genuinely cannot be arsed chasing back.
That's what I'm saying. That I want him to become of age now. I think he's not a kid anymore. I want him to kind of start stepping up. I know he's not doing that. He's not leading by example by any means. But I think he's at the age now where I think our expectations, and like you say, should be that the academy players can look up to him as an example. Because as far as I can see it right now, with his shoulders dropping and unwillingness to press at times, young players look at that and probably think, well, you know, if he gets away with it, I will too.
But it's not a case of downing him. It's not a case of expectation. He is of an age where the only thing you should be discussing is whether or not he can better his previous season's metrics. He has obviously got ability to develop further, but we're seeing a footballer who should be leading Manchester United week in, week out with performances going forward and backward. And even though we're only a couple of games into the season, it is concerning what we're seeing.
Yeah, and like that's probably what I'm getting at. I don't really, or actually, you know what? I don't care what age he is. I'm going to be harsh about it. I couldn't give a shit if he's 32 or 12. The least you expect, the bare minimum I demand off of any player who wears our jersey is effort. It's simple. I don't care if you're a 17-year-old lad coming in off the academy, or you're a 36-year-old striker who's been signed as a stopgap, or you're Marcus Rashford left wing. The very bare minimum I would demand and expect from any single player in any position on the pitch is minimum desire, minimum effort, minimum putting your life on the line on the pitch and giving everything you possibly can and coming off the field tired, not strolling off the pitch after giving a half-assed effort. You might be tired from doing a couple of runs forward and trying to create a bit, but you get stuck in. And that's why we're in the shit that we're in at the moment, is because not just Marcus Rashford, don't get me wrong, I'm not blaming him solely by any means. It's bred across the field. We're seeing players that are just not putting in good enough of a shift and good enough effort. And until players do that, we're going to continue to struggle. So they need to have a hard look at themselves, every single last one of them on the field, and ask themselves, am I doing enough? Am I putting in a full 90 minutes of effort? Or am I going through the motions collecting my wages? Simple as that.
Now, there's two little questions here at the end, not more so related to football, more so related to the people in general. And Mark Hanna has one for you, Brian. He wants to know, how does the missus not kill you with all the away games that you're getting yourself to?
Oh, Mark. What a can of worms.
Bring her in for this one.
She's out next door, probably watching Pretty Little Liar or something. I don't know what she's watching. It's it's quality time, Mark, is the key. So I flew to Munich on Tuesday. I got back Friday morning about 3:00 in the morning. Went to work for a few hours. Then we had a lovely night. Came home, had a lovely night together. Everyone was rosy in the garden. She knew I was going off again to the Burnley game. Took off, and I'm back again here. Mine and the kids all leaving. She's popping out for the evening. Mark, there's a couple of tricks to this. Trips to 5-star hotels a couple of times a year make an awful difference. Whether you enjoy them or not, it shows that you really care and they love it. I suppose, look, joking aside, she knew what she was getting into, Mark. I mean, she was told day one, when the first time we met, she knew priority in life will and always has been United. And she'll be a close second, but she'll always be second. And she's happy with that. She knows where she is. She was told on the wedding day, in our wedding speech, it was made very clear that this was the second best day of my life behind Ole sticking on in the Germans net in 99. So, I mean, you either get on with it or you get off board. But thankfully, at the moment, she's on with it. And the divorce papers haven't yet been written up, but I'm sure she'll leave me eventually, Mark, to keep you entertained. I'm sure the day will come where I'll be crying about the fact that she's taking the kids and the dog and I'm left in a bachelor pad. But I suppose if you are, I can just do a couple of more games a season and there'll be no hassle. So every cloud is a silver lining. Up the Reds.
What is it we see on a regular basis? United, kids, wife, in that order? I think it's pretty much that, Brian, isn't it?
I've never seen a truer flag.
Aye. And the very last one, and if I don't mention it, I think we might get hunted down by this man. It's a fellow on Twitter. He goes by the tag of United 58. And he's nothing if he's not consistent, because Dale, he wants to know what has happened with this mentality that sees Dale O'Donnell as a man who is bigger than the podcast.
I'd like to answer this as well, Dale. Once you have, I'd like to get involved in this one.
Yeah, we all need to be honest here. And the one who submitted the question, not for the first time, the sole reason they subscribe and listen to this podcast is me. So there you go. In a nutshell for you.
The sweet mother of God. I mean, we've waited weeks upon weeks for an answer, and this is what we get.
I mean, I know this is an audio podcast, but the three of us are currently on video while we're doing this. And I'm sure you can see that my face is aghast at that answer that I've just heard.
It's true.
I'm aghast, and I'm offended, I'm insulted, and I'm also laughing at it. He's right. United 58. You're dead right. Dale O'Donnell. It comes from the whole Napoleon syndrome. That's where it comes from. It's this ideal that a guy who's about 4'2" thinks he's the biggest man in every room, right? And this is the problem with Dale. Dale
small jockey, big whip.
Well, that's. I hope I never get to find out if that's right or wrong, to be honest with you. But no, it is true. Dale sees himself as a superstar of the podcast, and he sees himself as I think a little bit as the maybe Memphis Depay, David Beckham-esque kind of member of the team. But Dale, one of us is going to have to cut you down a few pegs. And if we cut you down much further, you'll be lying down on the floor. So
I'm the Dave Attenborough of the podcast.
Oh dear Jesus.
It's not about the size of the mic, it's about the quality of content that's going through it, Dale. You got a long way to go, my boy. And that is another one done and dusted. We count down the minutes for Palace at Old Trafford. Thank you for getting involved. Keep sending your messages through to us on all of the socials. You can get me at Shaun Connolly 85. Brian, how can people get in touch with you?
I repeat, do not follow me on Twitter. I talk an amount of nonsense. But if you really are sadistic enough that you want to put yourself through that, I'm at DaytrippingRed.
And Dale, how can people get in touch with the superstar?
Well, I'll try to get your mentions if you send me a
I think he's changed his handle to at Big Dale 2023.
I'll try to flick through all the mentions at O'Donnell Dale. Just make sure you subscribe to the Strettycast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Acast, and I'll try and make it onto the podcast next week.